it's been very powerful to set up a book, get all these influencers in it, launch these podcasts and guest posting campaigns, draw a lot of high quality backlinks to it, to the point where we get a lot of targeted traffic to it and get people asking us, can we come certified? Is my city open? Type of a thing. And that's really what the impetus was for. So it's still, I think the big payoff for the book is still rolling out, because this is a big audacious goal of mine to do. But I know I'm not going to be Rand Fishkin or some of these other guys that have been able to build up, but I can successfully attack the country, maybe other cities in the rest of the world, city by city, and slowly maybe grow it out at the grassroots level where I would never be able to compete from the top down, since this is such a mature market.
Hey gang, Troy Dean here from WP Elevation, and welcome to another episode of the WP Elevation podcast. This week, our feature guest is Phil Singleton from Kansas City Web and Kansas City SEO. He is a licensed duct tape marketing coach. He's co-written a book with John Jantsch, who is, of course, the author of Duct Tape Marketing. And what I absolutely love about Phil's approach to business is his obsession with leverage. He talks about producing content only with the express intention of being able to reuse and repurpose that content. He recently took 12 lawyers through the process of collaborating together and writing a book. And then each of those lawyers, he is now booking those lawyers on podcast episodes to position them as the authority and thought leaders in their field, which of course is bringing a whole bunch of leads to those 12 lawyers. He's got some fantastic processes and ways of thinking about things, and he turns all of his processes and systems into individual products that he can sell his clients, including the review funnel, which is fabulous. After he was on my podcast, he sent me an email asking me to leave a review to capture, the value and the gold nuggets that he brought to our audience and how he was as a guest on the podcast, which is great because it gets him more reviews on Google and on social sites. And he's now packaged that process and that system up, and he sells that as a standalone product to his clients. I know you're going to learn a lot from this interview, and a huge thank you to Phil, who after the interview introduced me on email to John Jantsch, who has agreed to have me on the Duct Tape Marketing podcast, which I'm very, very excited about. So you'll learn a lot with this interview and with this episode of the WP Elevation podcast. I can't wait for you to get to know Phil Singleton. Stay with us.
This is the WP Elevation podcast, helping WordPress consultants elevate.
Hey, this episode of the WP Elevation podcast is brought to you by WP Elevation. Well, more specifically, it's brought to you by a bunch of our happy customers. See, frankly, I feel a little bit awkward telling you how great WP Elevation is, because you're probably not going to believe me, because WP Elevation is my baby. It's something that we started over 3 years ago. Of course, now we're a team of coaches and mentors, and we have hundreds, and by the time you're listening to this, probably thousands of members all over the world. But it still really is something that I'm very passionate about. And of course, if you join WP Elevation, we make revenue and we make profit. So it's a little bit awkward if I tell you how great it is, because you probably think I'm just trying to sell you on it. And partially I am, because I know how beneficial the program is. So what I'd love to do instead is just introduce you to some of our customers. So if you go to wpelevation.com/the podcast, all one word, you'll be able to hear some of those stories from our customers and hear for yourself how WP Elevation has impacted their business and changed their lives. I hope you enjoy that, and I hope you check it out at some point. Right now, let's get back to the podcast. G'day folks, Troy Dean here from WP Elevation, and I'm very pleased to have with me all the way from Kansas City, Phil Singleton. Hey Phil, how you doing?
Hey Troy. Awesome. So psyched to be here.
Thanks for being on the show, man. I'm excited to talk with you as well. Now, for those that don't know, for those who have no idea who Phil Singleton is, give us your elevator pitch. Who are you? Where are you from? And what do you do?
My name's Phil Singleton. I'm based here in Kansas City. I guess I could really consider myself here, at least in my home base, as being a web designer. Most of that comes from, that's where a lot of the leads come from, right? But my bread and butter is really trying to build these lead generating websites that turn into long-term engagements with recurring income for us. But web designers and the web design searches are kind of where all the volume is at. So that's kind of what pays the bills.
Awesome. I want to come back and loop back and talk more about those lead generation websites that create recurring revenue, because you just, like, we're singing from the same hymn book, my friend.
Ding, ding, ding.
They are sweet words, aren't they? And definitely something that we talk a lot about here at WP Elevation. In fact, yesterday in our in our private Facebook group, one of our members was having a problem getting payment from a client. They're halfway through a project. They've done some design work. The client's now stalling on content. She's like, how do I get this next invoice from the client? And one of our other members came in and said, 2 words, marketing retainers. If they're on recurring retainers, you don't have to worry about getting paid. So we will talk more about that. I do just want to talk a little bit about the fact that you've written a book, an Amazon bestseller nonetheless, that you wrote with John Jantsch. Now, I want to talk a little bit about that relationship as well. But first of all, let's just dive into the book. How much work is involved in writing a book? It's called SEO for Growth, for those that don't know. The foreword is by Brian Clark from Copyblogger. You wrote it with John Jantsch. How much work is involved in writing a book, and what's the payoff?
That one I'd spent a little more time in because I took an unconventional, path to writing it. I first, it started off with me joining Duct Tape Marketing. I've been a Duct Tape Marketing certified consultant for 3 years, going into my 4th year right now. And they've got these annual summits that they go to, like I'm sure a lot of influencers have, where a lot of us meet in person. So the first time I sat down into this group that I initially joined, one of the guys who'd been in the network for a while showed me a book that he had just written. And I was like, oh man, maybe someday as a career milestone, I'll be able to have my own books. I thought it was the coolest thing for somebody to just drop that on the desk. Like, I just wrote this book. And 6 months later, out of that group, I actually gave an SEO presentation into it. I impressed a couple of the guys who were into this book writing thing. 6 months later, I had my first best-selling book, which was called The Small Business Owner's Guide to Local Lead Generation. And that was a group of 6 of us that essentially wrote a book together. And I want to get into how easy it was. A lot of this stuff, when you talk about podcasts, you talk about writing books, they look so far off. Like, I thought, like, this is an impossible dream, maybe a career kind of a bucket list type of thing that I'll get to eventually. But it ends up being a lot easier than you think it is, especially these days. Because with Amazon, and they've got their self-publishing platform called CreateSpace, very easy to direct publish. And there's all sorts of hacks you can do, I think, that I want to unfold to you guys here, which is how I kind of leveraged other influencers to build up influence in the book and get a lot of SEO value the way we wrote it. But it really wasn't, the first one really wasn't that difficult because there were 6 of us. Our path to writing it was really having one guy that was experienced. And then what he did is we essentially had a ghostwriter interview each one of us, I think, for about an hour to 2 hours a piece. It took this transcript and took our chapter that we were responsible for. In my case, I think it was web design and SEO, or a combination of both of those. And we got them back, and they just kind of put it into a book that we then would edit and go through. And we packaged it together into a book. Of course, having John or having an influencer in your back pocket that can help you get that first endorsement or 2, and he wrote the foreword to that one, is a huge help. But what the biggest eye-opener of this whole book process was, when we went out to try and get endorsements, it was the easiest thing that I had ever seen done in terms of having people say yes. Because when you go out and ask somebody to give you a book endorsement or a blurb, it kind of reaffirms them as an influencer, and they were a lot more agreeable to doing it. I think just because you're elevating them as an endorsement. I was like, geez, the next time I write a book, I really want to consider endorsement marketing or endorsement leveraging, because I don't think we had spent as much time as I did when we did SEO for Growth. Man, I really went after as many blurbs as possible, and then we actually leveraged them, a lot of them. And you'll see, and I'll talk a little bit about a few things about what we did in the book that I think made it very successful in terms of sales, but also got a lot of other people to market it for us. But that was the first one. So the first one was literally so easy. It was a group of 6 of us. We split up the work. Somebody transcribed and ghost wrote it for us. Then we came back and edited it because it's our own words. And then we went ahead and self-published it up on Amazon, and had a few people like John, a couple other ones, pile those sales up into 1 week, which gets you up into the Amazon bestseller look for a short period. But that's all you need at the end of the day to be able to put one of these little stickers on your book, and all of a sudden you're an Amazon bestseller, right? So that book did do well for a short period. It won an award on Small Biz Trends. I think whatever their Reader's Choice Award, which was a legitimate award for us. But it was great to do this. Learned a ton about it and carried that into my next book project that I did with John. But pretty easy, man. It's just one of those things where you think about it, it's not as hard as you think. And it's one of those things that really just ends up opening a ton of doors. You're an author now. You got a meeting, you got to mail out, you got something to drop onto a table that none of your competitors in your market are really going to have. And then it also enables you to do a bunch of other things that I didn't think about. Because when I do stuff these days, it's all about how can I leverage this 10 different ways instead of just one.
Yeah.
And I think the first book, we were able to do that a little bit, but man, SEO for growth, I just wrung every possible thing we could out of it. And I'd love to tell you a little bit about that, but that's really how we got into it. It was the Duct Tape network. It was leveraging John to some extent. And it was just a matter of really just having some help and getting to put all together and launch it out there.
So the process, and this is completely selfish motivation for me asking these questions, because that's exactly where I'm at. Like we've got a podcast. I make training videos all the time. I've spoken at conferences. Like I've ticked a lot of things off the bucket list. Writing a book is one of the things that I want to do. But for me, it is in the, oh my God, that's so overwhelmingly such a big task. It's in that bucket, which is probably just a mindset thing. So I'm snooping around at the moment. And there's many services that will, interview you, write the book, edit it, put together the artwork and the design, all that kind of stuff. Would you suggest to go down that path, or would you suggest to just have it written and then do all the sort of the publishing and the editing and the design work in-house?
We pretty much did it in-house, but there's a lot of, I think you go through agency routes or some people that specialize in it. I'm sure they're really good at what they do, but they're going to mark it up at a pretty good premium.
Yeah.
It's not as hard as you think to get the talent out there to actually edit it for you for a CreateSpace printout, design your own book. There's all sorts of little guides they have within CreateSpace that can do it. So it's very doable, I think, to do on a dime. And literally there's places you can go on Fiverr that if you're just a one-man band or a small shop and you want to get your own print book, lots of folks out there that can help you format one for CreateSpace, give you a nice book. And they've done it a million times, for maybe a couple $100 for the premium packages, you can get someone to guide you through it as long as you provide the content out there.
Yeah.
So that's out there. I would definitely do it in-house. Now the SEO for growth book that I did, I went through this small business owner's guide and I was like, I want to do this myself someday for SEO. And I spent a little more time putting that one together because I really wanted it to do a lot of different things for me. I wanted it to be good, or representative at least of my knowledge in the space. So I spent probably a good 6 or 12 months putting it together. But I initially went to John, and I was like, will you write the foreword? And I knew he was probably going to do that because he'd done it before. But I came out with this other idea. It's like, well, I've got this other idea where we could launch a series of businesses off of this, a course, a way to license lead generation into other cities and type of thing, and a way to kind of and launch a few other businesses, but then have you come on as a co-writer. And he was all over it. Now, I've of course been with him for 3 years at that point, met with him in person. He'd seen my work, seen here locally in Kansas City, seen that I was willing to help educate the other members of the group and that kind of stuff. So I really put in a lot of time and effort to get me to that point in time where I could bring him as a co-author. But it also changed the game, because I was like, at that point, he's a Wall Street Journal bestselling author of 4, I think he's one of the 5th books. And when he was going to come on to co-write it, he actually rewrote a whole chapter, edited the whole book. And the point where we had to be able to get his name on it basically had to go through a whole nother process of bringing it up to where I was comfortable to, I think, where he was comfortable. And he did add quite a bit of value onto that piece of it. But that's kind of where I got his involvement. But that was a game changer. Once he was on, his name was on it. You go and look through the book, we've got 50 of pretty much everybody out there that's an influencer. And then I think we were kind of smart in the way we did the book too, because of the first book, I realized geez, if you can plant as many people as you can into the book, it's going to give it credibility, but it also brings them into the book. Yeah. So we got over 50 people to endorse it. They're all in the front of the book.
Yeah.
We've got we've got an expert named at the end of 16 chapters that we told them, and we actually sent them, here's what we wrote about you. Here's 300 words about you that's going to, because you're the recommended expert for this chapter. Every single one of them edited it and wrote it back. They became part of the book because we said, hey, follow this person. Then I went in and we made sure that we referenced there's over 200 references to different articles in the book. We notified each one of those that they were also cited in the book. So that became part of the launch process now, right? Into a short week. You had guys like Larry Kim of WordStream that actually put it in their email letter. All these guys, a lot of them put us in social media. So then we were able to really get a lot of press and leverage that, what I would consider almost kind of blurb marketing or endorsement marketing, where you intentionally bring these guys in to make it better and to point it out. But when you notify people that you're going to put them on and make them part of the book, they're actually a lot willing to help you out when you launch it. And that was, I think, part of what really helped, and anybody could use this as a hack, is try and bring these guys in, these subject matter actors, and cite them, and then make them aware that you're doing it, and try and time it in with a launch week of 2 or 3 weeks of the course of Amazon. And you will get a top seller for at least in the top 10 list. And for us, I think we're up there for a couple of weeks. And even right now, if you type in SEO on Amazon, I think we're the second or third one up there. So we continue to get, pretty good sales off of it. And that was kind of the journey into that. But we essentially optimized the book, to some extent. Yeah. There's all sorts of things where we say, here's the glossary, make sure you read the glossary back to the website. And here's a review funnel. Here's a website test. And we made kind of the website a much bigger part of actually reading the book than I think most of other people do. And that really helped up to build lists and stuff like that.
It's fantastic. I'm looking at the influencer review page at the moment, SEO for Growth reviews, and it's like the who's who of, like if you read anything about SEO or inbound online, you're going to come across these people. There's Jay Bayer, there's Ruben Gomez, there's Joost de Valk, there's John Clark, Brian Halligan from HubSpot, Brian Dean. I mean, I follow all these guys. I read all their blogs all the time. And to have all these people pointing, which was one of my questions, actually doing a little bit of snooping around before this interview and finding a lot of influencers pointing to your work. And I was curious as to how you nurtured those relationships. And I think you just answered that question. I
hacked my way into it. I mean, you use one, especially when you get 2 or 3, and then we went to go get other endorsements and say, hey, these 2 or 3 guys gave this endorsement. And all of a sudden it was like they just came rolling in, right? You get those first 2 or 3, and then you'll just get as many as you want, you have time for.
It's interesting. I was mentored by a guy named Ed Dale years ago, and he's an Australian internet marketer. And he said to me, look, success there's a fairly simple process for being successful in business. And he said, in today's day and age, it's all about becoming a top 20 market influencer, right? And I said, okay, well, how do you know, like, how do you become a top 20 market influencer? And he said, well, first thing you do is you make a spreadsheet of who you think the top 20 market influencers are in your space. And I said, great. And then how do you know when you are, how do you get into that list? He said, well, one of the indicators is that they're all pointing to your content and they're all sharing your content with their audience. And I said, and instantly I said, so if I started a podcast and interviewed the top 20 influencers in my space, they would ultimately share that content with their audience because I'm interviewing them and they are actually the content. And he said, you're a very clever boy, my friend. So that's what I did. I made a list of actually 50 of the top 20 of the top 50 influencers in the WordPress space. I started a podcast and I started interviewing them. This is a very similar process. It's just in book format rather than podcast format.
And I'm doing the flip because I'm late to the game, but you can see back behind me here that I finally started my podcast, which I'm also one of these things where I'm just like so kicking myself for not having started this a long time ago. And I'll talk about that a little bit later, how that's really changed things for me. But yeah, the book thing really works. And you had mentioned starting your own book. I wanted to mention one of the guys I follow is Josh Steinley, and he's out there and he wrote this book called Chief Marketing Officers at Work. And all it is, it's basically a set of interviews of like top people. So it's CMOs, PayPal, GoDaddy, and he really it's basically just, so I was thinking, geez, if I start my own podcast, all of a sudden you ask some pointed questions and do an aggregation like he did of a book of where you're interviewing people. Now there's one other book I could write almost in my sleep. If I think about it strategically, get the right people and then aggregate that and do a book, nice transcription. That's one of the reasons why I'm starting my own podcast, among many others, is to kind of be writing a book in the background.
Awesome. Interestingly, I read a statistic recently that blew my mind that something like, it's ridiculously high, like something like 70 or 80% of books that get started. So you start reading a book and something like 70 or 80% of starts don't actually get finished. Now, I don't know how they measure that because, you can't track. I hope you can't track me reading a book in bed at night. Pages.
Maybe Kindles, I guess they could do.
That's right. I hope Google's not watching me through the pages. But so the point I'm trying to make is that I think a lot of people, including myself, get hung up on the paralysis by analysis, and I'm a fairly big action taker and fairly fast mover in all areas of my business and my life. But this writing a book thing is like, there's definitely a block there where, for me, it has to be perfect. Otherwise I would feel like I want to be super proud of it, And the reality is that having the book, is probably, going to have more impact than it actually being perfect. You know what I mean?
Totally. I mean, I read it now and I just want to go through it. And there's certain things that we would, do it again. There's, every time you write a book, and I've even said we had like professionally edited, there's still like, 3 or 4 typos that come up, and a lot of books are like that and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think getting it out there, and like you said, it's just, it's a lot easier than you think. And you can always, keep improving them. I mean, we wrote this thing, came out in 2016, 2017's passed, it's time to update it and perfect it a little bit more and make it better. Of course, technology books are going to be at that. Totally agree.
Yeah. What's been the payoff, apart from having a beautiful book reviews page with lots of lovely influencers on your website? What's been the payoff of having the book in terms of the business, and maybe even like, what's it done for your professional network, and what sort of doors has it opened?
So this one's really been big. I think the way we rolled it out, it's brought actual clients will come in and say, hey, are you available? And if they're ideal, we're say 100% or 90% of our clients are either in Kansas City or in the Midwest. Now I've got like probably 30% of clients that are, I've got several in all sorts of states all around the country now. And they read the book, they know you. And that's one of the reasons like we wrote it, is because literally it's in there. It's like, you can do this yourself. And we got all the tactics in there, do all this stuff, and it's there. So the folks that come in and say, I've read your book, they're so warm. It's like basically taking an order. And that's really changed things in terms of, now it's not like it's like brought thousands of new clients, but it's brought a lot of them. Has helped me grow over the last year. But really my main reason for writing it wasn't to just have another influencer, wasn't to try and build relationships with all these guys, so that was all great stuff, or even try and get more clients, which it really has done. Really what I was trying to do is to try and build an authority website off of SEO for growth, and then use that as a way to build a network. And that's what we did. We built SEO for growth on WordPress multi-site. And then what we've done is we've created geographic mini sites off of that on subdomains. So if you type in like St. Louis SEO, you'll see that consultant site comes up number 1 or number 2 in St. Louis for that search. And we brought on 20 different like agency types that don't have the ability to maybe rank for SEO type services in their city. So it's kind of a way for me to scale what I've done in Kansas City and bring that through and the books really have been helpful in doing that. We've on the beta phase, we've been able to launch 20 of these. When the process, sometimes next year, we're going to open it up and try and get a lot more cities. But it's been very powerful to set up a book, get all these influencers in it, launch these podcasts and guest posting campaigns, draw a lot of high quality backlinks to it, to the point where we get a lot of targeted traffic to it, and get people asking us, can we come certified? Is my city open? Type of a thing. And that's really what the impetus was for. So it's still, I think the big payoff for the book is still rolling out, because this is a big audacious like goal of mine to do. But I know I'm not going to be Rand Fishkin or some of these other guys that have been able to build up, but I can successfully attack the country, maybe other cities in the rest of the world, city by city, and slowly maybe grow it out at the grassroots level, where I would never be able to compete from the top down, since this is such a mature market.
Awesome. A couple of things I want to talk about. In fact, there's many things I want to talk about, but just trying to narrow this down a little bit. Talk to us about how you manage. One of the things about a project like writing a book or launching a podcast is the sheer amount of tasks involved. How do you triage and say, okay, this is what we're going to focus on in the next 2 weeks, and if these things don't get done, that's okay. I'm happy to let them go, because that's a constant battle I see within our business and all our students, is the fear of missing out on these other things sometimes sacrifices doing what you're doing right now really well, because you're trying to multitask and do too much. So when it comes to writing a book or launching a podcast or, scaling up and bringing these other consultants on, how do you know when to say, it doesn't matter if that doesn't get done?
In terms of books or just projects in general?
Just projects in general, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely got to the point at the end of last year where I was like, I have to focus on a few things. It's growing my own business, taking myself out. And really what I've noticed over the last year, and other people have told me it's the same thing, is even though I'm not a name within some of the other folks that I'm trying to become, build my own influence with, I've been able to generate a ton of leads and authority and types of things where I've got a bunch of proof where I'm leaving money all over the table because I'm focusing on too many things and I could be focused on this area. So I'm just like, I have to stop right now, and I have to take myself out of really operational piece of my business because I still have my hands on websites right now.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't probably be doing this at this point in the career, but I'm passionate about it and I want to bat 1,000. So I've got to kind of micromanage to a piece of it. But I did, to get to your point, at the end of last year, I was like, I got to pick the areas I got to focus on right now. And that's going to be growing my kind of business here and trying to grow that out, working on SEO for growth, because that's always going to be probably my main side gig, but it's actually becoming a bigger one. Mm-hmm. And then I've got another thing where I'm focusing on basically podcast guesting services, because I've done that a lot last year, and that has helped. That's been the number one. I've been doing this for 12 years straight. Never have had anything give me as much benefits or clients as getting on 50 podcasts. The links, the increase of authority, the actual clients I'm getting off of it for spending 20 or 30 minutes with somebody who already has a trusted audience. And now I'm inside their head right now. That's just absolutely blown my mind away. And it's really changed. So really for me, it's just been, I had to stop all these other things I was thinking about, except for my own podcast. So let's make that 4, and then just focus on. I said, I'm no more. I mean, I'm the type of guy that's kind of only comfortable when I'm doggy paddling, I guess, to some extent. But at the end of last year, I felt like I was actually starting to drown and take a little water up the nose. So I have this year really put it down as I'm only going to focus on these things. But systemizing some things is really important. So even like get to a point of like writing a book, okay, which we're actually doing this for a lot of clients right now. And the way we're doing it is we're saying, okay, look, we know having a website that's optimized is really important. We know content marketing, partitioning, social media is really important. So the way we're trying to get 10 wins out of just one comes back to the blogging strategy. And that is, every time we do a blog right now, we're doing them in a series of 10 or 15 posts. And each one of those posts are standalone posts, but stitched together, they're an ebook on a how-to that we can spin into a call to action ebook or a Kindle up on Amazon, helping to create our clients become authors and build their authority and eventually maybe doing podcast guesting campaigns on their own. But it's kind of one of those things where if you think about it strategically ahead, we're actually could take this to another level and actually be writing chapters of a book. So now all of a sudden we're trying to figure out ways strategically to actually really repurpose stuff in a way that helps us get real ROI and money out of it. And that's kind of where it's coming back to us right now, is kind of focusing on kind of the blog strategy. You write the pages, you're focusing on SEO, you're distributing out on social media, and then we're figuring out ways to stitch them together to turn them into books and pamphlets, and maybe even, we just did this one for a group of 10 lawyers. It's a 150-page book. It launched yesterday. So each one of them wrote 3,000 words in their specialty, how to hire lawyers, right? We're going to have a launch party next week and create a referral network between those 12. But I just made them an authority, and they're out there going, how did you guys write this book? Their friends are asking them. My web guy did that. What kind of web guy does that, right? Well, it's one of these things where this is what it all comes back to. And guess what? We're building them a website on it too. So, but this is one of those things that just came from a blogging strategy. Some of this content's already repurposed from some of the things that we're doing. So to get to your point, it's like just trying to figure out ways to really think about things strategically and make sure that you can actually get 10x out of them, 10 wins instead of just one, because you can't take 10 random blog posts and stitch them together in an ebook. It doesn't work, right? But for the same amount of work, you could actually make that a chapter as a book or its own independent ebook. So stuff like that, I think, is really what I've been trying to focus on now, to try and just squeeze as much opportunity and money out of the time that we're spending on stuff as possible, and then limiting those things to just a few things that I've been working on.
Smart. It would be remiss of me if we didn't talk about SEO for a moment for our audience who are freelance consultants selling web design services to clients. And this happens all the time. We had a member post in our Facebook group last week who said, I'm at the point now where my web design business is pretty good. It's systemized. We've got good leads. We know how to do it. It's profitable. My clients are now coming back to me asking me, how do we get more traffic to our website? Can you manage our SEO? And they're not sure where to start. So if you're in that position and you need to start selling SEO services to your clients, what's like the first 2 or 3 things you should be thinking about and you should be educating yourself about?
Well, our whole pitch is, and I've got actually 3 websites in Kansas City. One's like a marketing agency type site. One's just an SEO services site. And one is more exclusively web design. And 80 to 90% of our leads come in from people looking for web design. because everybody out there that's a company wants the same thing. They want leads in business and they need like marketing help, but they always look for something tactically, right? And for us as web designers, it's awesome because I think we have the keys of the kingdom. That's what gets searched the most. And we've got a unique opportunity when people are looking at this to be like the marketing person for them. So we had that conversation real early. We're just like, hey, they come in for a website and we say, well, you don't necessarily need a website. You need a marketing platform. We need to start talking about what elements to put on your website now and who's going to start filling those content needs on the website. Because every mock-up that we do, and this is one of my super secret tips that hopefully this will help people listening, is no matter what people want, every one of our mock-ups looks almost like an infographic, and we purposely put in things that people need for content, right? We make sure we've got a blog feed on it. We make sure that we've got social media feeds on it. We make sure that we've got reviews on it. We make sure that we've got a video on it. Because when they see that, and they see it's a long post, and it looks busy when we see these mock-ups that we do for them, they'll say, well, it looks a little busy. Is it too much? Do we need all that stuff? Who's going to do this work? And they start talking about taking it off. And then we have that conversation. Well, you take that off, that's fine, but this is going to have an effect on SEO and lead generation. Now you're really getting, and they're seeing it. At the beginning, they're just like, they want a website, they want to improve their web presence, they hope that you build something and people will come. Then we start having a conversation about, well, this isn't just a website. You need to have a marketing platform. It has to be the referral source for all the content that you should be publishing so people are coming back to it. We start talking about Facebook Pixel and AdWords retargeting and video, making sure that you got testimonials on there, all this story brand stuff that Donald Miller talks about and that kind of thing. And at the beginning, when we're talking about the website, we're having that conversation to position ourselves as the digital marketing source for them after we launch the website. Because that's the end game for us. It's nice to be able to charge somebody $7,500 or $10,000 or $20,000 for a website, but that's not my ideal client. My ideal client pays me $2,000 to $3,000 a month after we launch the website. And that's really how we can scale this business out. Now, we have some that pay us $5,000 to $10,000 a month. Tough, because they want a pound of flesh. When you're charging somebody that much money, they want you in their office, they want meetings every week. But you're in that $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a month range where you can supply blog posts and help them out with social media posting, give them maybe a review funnel to build reviews. You can really help. You can really help your clients deliver, the type of stuff that's actually going to help them move the needle and generate leads. And you're in a position now because you're their digital marketer. So we're doing that at the beginning. We're not like afterwards doing it, say what we can do. I'm trying to bake that in early on. And if they balk at that a little bit in the beginning, I still have that after they've already paid us a down payment time where I use that mock-up phase, right, to really let it sink in and say, okay, let's take this off and talk about how not doing that is going to affect your online visibility or how everybody at your other competitors are doing that. And we'll do it early on too, or if there's your listeners don't necessarily subscribe to some of these, but I subscribe to Ahrefs and SEMrush. Great to be able to have that conversation on website. The first time we talk about somebody at our website, we ask them who their competitors are and who they think they're doing well online. And we pull up, and almost 9 times out of 10, they've got better visibility. You can show them how much more traffic they're getting, how much their organic value is worth in terms of AdWords. So you get the new client that you're trying to close, maybe their organic traffic value, according to these tools, is only like $5 a month or $100 a month. Their main competitor might have a $10,000 or $20,000 a month of organic traffic value. Very powerful stuff where you can get in and say, well, we got to start addressing that now in the web design phase and start baking some of this stuff in. That's how we're going to turn it into a lead generator for you. And that's and the other thing is a lot of web design that we compete with, like here in town, they're not having those conversations. They're talking about web design and functions and features.
That's right.
They're not really wanting to talk about SEO so much, maybe not to open up a can of worms or trying to get in it, but it's the ideal time, one, to differentiate yourself, but two, to position yourself to get them on those retainers, which now we're up over 50 monthly retainers, getting on 60 right now that are paying us anywhere from $1,000 to $10,000 a month. And that's we're awesome. Like their digital, marketing provider. And we still do the one-offs. Because that got to pay the bills, but that's not the ideal.
Yeah. Congratulations, man. That's great. It's, you've built a fantastic model here. One thing I want to talk about, and just to reiterate a point that you're making, the way I have this conversation almost on a daily basis is the way to stop competing with other web designers is to change the narrative. So there's a conversation already going on in your prospect's head before they talk to you. And that is they like no business owner ever woke up in the middle of the night and woke, their spouse up and said, I can't sleep because I've finally realized how we're going to fix the business. I need to go spend $15,000 on our website. That never happens, right? Nobody wants to spend money on their website because they perceive it as a sunk cost. So the conversation that's going on in your prospect's head before they talk to you is, you're going to cost me money and I begrudge having to spend money on my website because I reckon I could do it myself over at Wix for free, right? And I don't want to have to spend money on a website because I can't. For me, it's like a sunk cost. So what you have to do is you have to change that conversation the very first moment you interact with your prospect. And what I love about your website is this. The first thing I see on your website is they sell websites. We build lead generating websites. Big difference. Huge. That's a differentiating statement straight off the bat. Like, they sell websites. We build lead generating websites. So if you want your website to actually generate leads, you're talking to the right people. Oh, and by the way, we've written a few of these books that you might find helpful, right? Great authority positioning. So by the time you're having a conversation, you are already perceived as the specialist. You're already perceived as the authority. And the client comes to you and says, well, Phil, you're the expert. You tell me what we should do. And that's exactly where you want the client, because then you have full creative hopefully full creative control to execute a great strategy, which is actually going to help them, rather than having to spend most of your time educating them and avoiding them micromanaging you, which is where most of us, when we start out, that's how the relationship, generally unfolds. Is the client comes in, they try to micromanage us, they begrudge spending the money because ultimately they don't trust that we know what we're doing. They don't trust that we're going to get them an outcome. And you've managed to turn that conversation around right from the start, which is awesome. And I applaud.
It also gives us a little bit more authority in the process, in that we have to design. So you get a little, people get a little bit lost in the artistic part of the design where they're, and if you come across as, we're going to build this into a lead, they're all of a sudden listening to what you have to say versus trying to fight you on some of the artistic stuff, which I think for us has been very powerful because it helps us kind of speed things up. One of the props I'll give you, because you just had this guy on a while ago, but I know it was the last episode, is Stephen Spencer.
Oh, yeah.
I bring this book
to
every single meeting that we have, so people can hold what this book is. And all I tell them is, this is what it takes. This is the information that you need to put in your website to make the phone ring.
It's
a lot more than the artistic piece. And all of a sudden it's like,
that's way too hard, man. I'll just pay you to do it for me, because I don't want to read that book. It's the size of War and Peace.
Exactly. But it also shows them it's not smoke and mirrors. We're not just saying these guys do it differently. There's actually like a huge industry authoritative textbook that's written. And the reason this exists is so that you can show up on Google and other places better. And it all starts with the website. I mean, it's really about that. So that's a really powerful. You just go out and buy this and bring this. All of a sudden, when we bring this to a meeting, we have just differentiated ourselves from the other 3 or 5 people that they met with, because none of them, either they don't read it or they don't want to read it, they don't want to touch it. But it's just a great prop to have. And we also give them this like the Forbes on here, how to plan and budget for SEO. So again, they're coming to us for web design. We want to, just what you hit on the head right there, which is, it's not a sunk cost. You can't look at this as just a cost of doing business. You have to look at it as an investment and a revenue generator. And once you can get them to do it, then all of a sudden, if they have the budget, they're all of a sudden saying, okay, I get it now. This is an investment that's going to make me money, not a sunk cost that's going to cost me money. And once you can get that light bulb to go off, and all of a sudden they're all of a sudden, okay, I'm going to, and you can prove it. Now they're willing to give you some of their budget to turn this thing into a lead generator.
Not to labor the point too much, but I remember listening to an audio with Dan Kennedy once, and he was saying he was working with this company, he was getting paid a monthly retainer, working with this company who were kind of really in strife. And he started working with the company. They fired the CEO, they brought in the new CEO, and the new CEO basically came in and fired all the consultants except Dan. And, he had a meeting with Dan. And Dan, I think at the time, his monthly retainer was probably worth more than the CEO's wage. And the CEO was really resentful towards Dan. And he was like, I don't know why you get paid what you get paid. And I don't know why the board won't let me fire you. And Dan said, because I bring you customers and no one else in the building knows how to do that. And you think I'm a magician. That's why you pay me what you pay me. Because without me, it doesn't rain. And so if you can make it rain, I mean, Brian Clark, Rainmaker, if you can make it rain, you're in a really powerful position. And as you said before, we have the keys to the kingdom because we know how to do this.
Yes.
I want to talk about budget. You did mention that before. You said you said, if they have the budget, they're willing to make the investment. How do you qualify your client's budget before you get too far down the rabbit hole with them?
Well, on our site, like if you come to it right now, everything funnels into either a call center or a form on our website that's a CRM. So they basically what they do is they come in, they fill out the form, and we automatically send them. I send them another ebook that I wrote that's called How to Hire a Web Designer and Not Get Burned by Another Agency. Mm-hmm. And in that, I've got the pricing in there, and I actually say we're willing to set up a meeting with you, but I really would like you to read through this book, because the book, we try and differentiate the Wix and the Weebly's, the Craigslist offshore guys, the boutique agencies and the big agencies, and we're giving them the pricing. So we're educating them on that ahead of time. But I actually have a full-time inbound guy that handles that. And the biggest thing that we're trying to do, obviously, is qualify that budget. How much you spend on marketing. We tell them, hey, generally we're going to start out, for us, we start at $7,500, a website for a basic informational one that's got the SEO started into it. And sometimes you're going to get the people that are like, oh my God. Other ones are like, that's, kind of what we had in mind type of a thing. And that time. So, but you have to do that, because if you look up like Kansas City web, anything that has to do with SEO or web design, I mean, we're all over the place, multiple places. The phone rings a lot. But a lot of people also don't have the money or not even willing to listen to you on that SEO,
it's just price shopping,
lead generation piece. Right. But we had to qualify that ahead of time. That's one of the reasons I had to hire a guy. It's like, be careful what you wish for. You get 10 calls coming into your office a day. You got to talk to people. Yeah. If you're that'll kill you.
Correct.
Right. So being able to qualify people, the actual 2 or 3 of them might have the budget to even turn around, is an important part of the process. So that's kind of how we do it. Is we do it over the phone, and we try and get right to the point. Like, here's kind of where we start. Is this anywhere within your budget? And they say no. We try and either refer them off or say, here's one of our books. This will help you get the most for your money, and maybe you can come back to us someday.
How important is recurring revenue to your business, and how do you overcome clients' objections who are like, we don't want another monthly subscription. We've got too many already. We don't want to pay a monthly fee.
I think when we lay out like the fact that the website is a marketing hub and it needs to be powered with all these things, and those things are blog writing, getting consistent reviews, posting on social media, it's real work that when you start to lay that out, they understand that they're either going to have to figure it out themselves and hire somebody who may not know how to do it, or they'll kind of hire us. So that's one of the things that we tell folks is to try and just outline, here's what the process is. And you can try and do it yourself, and you're going to get some results on it, but you hire us, we're going to probably be cheaper than a full-time person, and we're more experienced. We're going to do better with the content that we created that you give us. But we don't, if somebody's coming in and they buy in that piece of it and they've got the budget, it's a pretty easy sell to get them, especially if you can come on how, like you came to our website. We've really stacked the deck. And I basically just recently redid ours. Whether you like the design or you don't, I really redesigned it based on the Google search quality evaluator guidelines. And they go in there, and there's a 160-page document that's basically said, this is what these 15,000 people should look at when they rate the algorithm. And it's literally, they say in there probably more than 100 times, education, authority, and trust. EAT, education, authority, and trust. So you start looking at putting the elements on your website that Google is telling you to put on there, it actually works. So you can see on my website now, every page that you go on, I've got a review that slaps you in the face. It says, here I am, here's my face, here's what this person said about us. You go to this review, it's all about that kind of stuff. That really does help you. If somebody's in the game to hire somebody and get better results, and then you've already stacked the deck on your website and other places, they're a lot less resistant to paying that. Yeah. And I've just found, because again, I've done all these things that, the podcast and the book, I've really positioned myself to be in this area. If they're thinking about these kind of services, we've got so much more proof and evidence that's visible that we become kind of the natural choice. Yeah. The people that don't have the budget don't have the budget, but the ones that do, our closure rate's pretty high on that.
Look, just before we wrap up, I want to talk about your podcast. You've launched a podcast. I believe that's the sign behind Local Business Leaders. Is that it?
That's it.
Awesome. Why did you start a podcast, apart from the fact that it's a lot of fun? And what do you hope to get out of the podcast?
Well, I started doing my own guesting campaign earlier this year, and I was like, holy cow, all this stuff that I got. I did it because great natural way to get backlinks. But then I saw all these other things. Like every time I have a podcast, you'll see I actually go and I send my review funnel. So I ask people to review me based on the knowledge shared in the podcast, like you'll get.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been sending the reviews where I want to. So I went from like 50 to 60 reviews on my Google Maps. Now I've got over 115, which has helped pull me back up into a dominant position on the maps and it's given me the reviews that makes the phone ring off the hook.
That's smart.
Every single one of the this is what I say. If you get into your followers and your listeners that are trying to do this, you start spinning this blog strategy into an ebook, leverage it into your own guesting campaign. You'll get backlinks that will help you out organically and help you in your local area, your niche. You'll also can position in a way to get lots of great reviews that again will help you locally, but also just build trust on your website. And I've actually taken some of those and put them up on my website. Just another review. Phil really knew his stuff on my podcast. And it's just another authority figure saying that in a different format that we're doing it. So that's one. And then I was like, I've done 50 of these now. If I would have had a podcast ready to go earlier this year, I could have had my own audience already built up, just leveraging other people. Because some people are going to like what I have to say. And even if I pick up a few, I could have had, God knows how many listeners myself if I would have had this, which hasn't actually been officially launched yet. Maybe by the time I've got it in the background, maybe by the time this thing airs, it'll actually, and mine's going to probably be next week because I've got 6 or 7 of them. And the other thing is access. So what I'm doing is I'm going in the reason I did it is I'm going to interview people. I'm going to get some niche authorities and marketing other places to try and share some of those things. But I'm also going to use it here locally to get access to bigger fish that I want to get into. Can I sell you a website? No. Will you be on my podcast, the Local Business Leaders Podcast? Yes. And I know that works. I've talked to a few people that have done it. Definitely. Great way to get access to people. Like you already know.
And it's very flattering to ask someone, hey, I've got this podcast called Local Business Leaders. I'd like to interview you on the podcast.
That was intentional.
Phil. You consider me a local business leader.
Exactly.
Man, I like you a lot, dude. I like the fact that you think about, there's a couple of things. Peter Mead, my friend, talks about optimizing all the things, right? So I see that that's what you're doing. And I also see that and another friend of mine, Dave Jennings, is all about leverage. He's always thinking about what we do today. What is that going to mean in like 3 weeks' time and 3 months' time? How do we leverage what we do right now for maximum return out of that effort? And I feel like you've really got something humming along here. I wonder how you manage. I know I'll come back to the same question, but how do you deal with the overwhelm? Do you ever just like get to the point where so where do you store things? Do you use like Asana or Evernote? Like you have these ideas, how do you put them down and make sure they get action?
Most of it, yeah. And I use a bunch of different tools to kind of manage and deliver. Like the SEO services, I use UpCity, great task management thing where I can actually put my list of stuff and somebody else executes it for us, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
I'm looking for a better team flow. I use Active Collab. Those guys have been around for a while, but I know a lot of people use Teamwork and some other ones.
Yep.
I've got a new person coming on that's going to help me out with that. But I will say I've got 7 mouths to feed here. So I got W-2s and some full-time contractors. But I'm really guilty of still running this business as a solopreneur. And the thing that I'm doing starting this month is I'm actually going to try and really start running it more as a business because I have business sales and volume. I still just run it like a solopreneur and it's got to stop because it's like you're saying, I don't have an answer to your question. A lot of it's up in here and that's the worst thing to do. And it's going to affect, it's already costing me a lot of different things. And I have to put that down and make it more of a business this year.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the constant challenge of knowing knowing what's important and what's not, and then making sure that what is important gets done well rather than just doing too many things half-assed, which I've been guilty of that over the years. And our mission this year is to slow down and execute better. That's
because otherwise clients start falling off the train.
Yeah.
Or I feel right now, I feel like I'm leaving money all over the table by just trying to do a few things half-assed. Whereas if I focus on it, I'll get maximum value, money out of focusing on.
Yeah. Awesome. Hey, Phil, this has been, I could do this for, we could.
I told you, this is among people here. So I'm fired up.
Totally. And also I got to say, I'm a huge fan of John Jansch. I'm a huge fan of Duct Tape Marketing. I read that book and it completely, I was all over the E-Myth back in those days. And I was like, this is all good. But then I read Duct Tape Marketing. I'm like, wow, this is the practical application of all this theory that I've been learning. he's been a huge influence on me, and it's been, so it's good to actually talk to someone who's kind of been a part of that ecosystem as well and been a part of that world. So, and I really like what you're doing, man. And it's funny because a lot of the things that we teach at WP Elevation, you've actually done. You're actually executing this stuff. So I can't wait to share this episode with our audience. I can't wait to drop some links into what you're doing into our members group, and use you as a bit of a showcase study on, how to pull this stuff off.
So SEOforgrowth.com is the book. KCWebdesigner.com is where you pointed out, which I think is a great example of how to apply Google search evaluator guidelines to a website. And you'll see it's basically me stacking the deck with all sorts of third-party proof versus here's what we do. It's more like here's what people say about us.
Yeah.
And I've also got the podcastbookers.com, which is how I think we approached you.
Yeah, that's right.
People could easily do this on their own. Like I say, I'm among people. I got a D in computer science. I talked about this before, is where I came into this kind of as a second career. I know that there's a lot of people in your group where if they hunkered down, focused in on a blog strategy on their own, put a book program into autopilot, made themselves an author and launched themselves and their own author central page on Amazon, started to work on their personal branding and authority, then use that as a way to crack into some podcast guesting and get those backlinks and reviews, making an immediate impact on a lot of people's business in your group, which is really one of the things I wanted to get across, because I found this out last year, just kind of like, oh, what's a good way to get natural quality backlinks? All of a sudden it's like, all this stuff started to like rain down. I've had at least $100,000 in new business come from just a podcast. I don't even talk about that because that's not the main benefit that I see. It's nice, and it's maybe a one-off where I got lucky. But if I were to start this over again and really trying to get out there, I'd work on my own website. I'd work on my own reviews. I'd work on my own personal branding and authority. And I'd start, because there's so many podcasts that are out there right now that need good guests, especially if you can niche on something. It's a way to make money and also differentiate yourself in your market and your niche, like right now. And I say that passionately. I'm not trying to sell anybody anything. It just works so well for me.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm continuing to do it, and I'm continuing to do it all the time. I think it's something to share that'll work for people.
Awesome. I'm going to include all of the links that we've spoken about, all the books, all the references and resources in the show notes, which will be at wpelevation.com/Phil Singleton, all one word, all lowercase, no spaces, hyphens, or underscores, as they say. Hey, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show. I'm going to, at some point, get you back on for another follow-up episode or a webinar for our audience, because I just love what you're doing and I'd love to pick your brain more.
Oh, I'd love to get you on ours too, so I put you on the spot.
Totally. Hit me up.
At some point. Sweet, man. Do it back-to-back next time. All right.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Phil. Appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
Well, I hope you're as excited as I am after that interview with Phil Singleton. I just could have spoken to him for hours, and in fact, we spoke off camera about the possibility of bringing Phil back for a deep dive webinar to show how he sets up some of his systems and processes and then turns them into standalone products that he sells his clients. So keep your eyes out for that. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes at wpelevation.com/iTunes. And leave us a rating and a review and some feedback. We really value your feedback, and we want to make the podcast as valuable as possible for you. So you need to tell us what you want to hear next. And if you don't use Apple or iTunes, then you can subscribe at Stitcher Radio. Just go to wpelevation.com/Stitcher, and you can subscribe to the podcast over there. And please get on over to our Facebook page and check out our new weekly live show. It's called Silence is Golden, and it's where Simon Kelly and myself talk about all things related to running a WordPress consulting business. We give you an update on the news of the week. We also showcase a tool of the week, and we peel back the curtain and show you one of the processes that we're using in our WordPress consulting businesses. You can find that at wpelevation.com/Facebook. That's our Facebook page. And of course, we post up the recordings of that show and the podcast and all of the other video content that we produce here at WP Elevation headquarters. We post it all up onto our YouTube channel over at wpelevation.com/YouTube. Make sure you subscribe over there and click the bell to get notified. And again, leave us some feedback. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. We are listening and we're paying attention. And we want to make WP Elevation the most valuable resource for your business. So I look forward to seeing you again next week on the WP Elevation podcast. Until then, I'm Troy Dean. Go Elevate.